Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.
And a very good morning to you. This is Newsline, live as always from the Newsfirst studios in Dawson Street in Colombo. And this morning we've got an expert from the shipping industry to tell us all about the way free ports work and the challenges faced by the industry in dealing with import and export cargo. He's right here with us, who's the head of the Shippers Academy in Colombo, and Mr. Rohan Masakorala. Very good morning to you, Mr. Masakorala.
Morning, Faraz. It's nice to be here again.
Very nice of you to pop in and help us take the information across to the public. We hear, we see, we read it in the press and so on, and there's some concern that Sri Lanka is attracting contraband cargo, in this instance, supposedly garbage. What is there anything particular about Sri Lanka that attracts this sort of cargo to our country?
Well, when you're a major transshipment hub
Right.
and you operate international free zones for global distribution,
Yeah.
Worldwide players come into your location, whether it is Sri Lanka, Singapore, Dubai, Hong Kong. These are major hubs.
Yeah.
And they are generally considered red ports because various types of cargo interchange in our ports and free zones. So obviously there can be fraudulent exporters and importers all over the world. And they try to use these hubs to distribute to various markets various products. That is where the customs play an important role in tracking them and understanding them and then locating them if there are any fraudulent products.
So a free port doesn't necessarily have to be within a port complex or an airport complex?
No, generally if you have enough space, yes, you can have free ports. Even
Right.
Port of Colombo is declared as a free port, but it doesn't do much of free port activity because it's focused on transshipment. It doesn't have enough space. So in Sri Lanka we have about 5 declared free zones which was started in 2013 in order to compete with places like Dubai and Singapore to do international value addition for the global supply chains.
So you bring some stuff in to and have it at the free port, and you have warehouses, so you can do whatever it is, value added or whatever.
Exactly. Now, value addition is restricted in free ports in Sri Lanka, the law of Sri Lanka, because we have 2 things called the free trade zones.
Right.
Those are the manufacturing zones in
Right.
Katunayake and all these places. Free zones have up to about 10% value addition given to them. Their main job is to connect global cargo supply chains on the request of various international buyers. For example, if a UK manufacturer wants to store their wines in Sri Lanka, they do it and they say, okay, label it like this, package it like this, send it to so much to India, so much to Pakistan, so much to Mali. So they control the distribution from a free zone in a logistics hub.
I see.
That's what happens in Singapore, that's what happens in Dubai.
And Sri Lanka is no different.
Sri Lanka is no different. Actually, Sri Lanka got into this business little late in 2013. It's going beyond the business of transshipment. That brings in a lot of revenue to the country, job creation and turnover in the port sector. Because international goods, various types of goods, are repacked and restored and created value addition in a hub.
But physically they'll need to be located within that free port area.
Absolutely. There are strict rules. In the case of Sri Lanka, the free zones are all coming under the Board of Investment. And they have very strict rules to operate and declare free zone cargo. Even the declaration of customs is specifically identified in a different color in terms of declaration to the customs system.
Right.
So you can declare a way ahead, you can identify if either this cargo is coming to a free zone or the domestic market or a free trade zone.
Right. So the essential difference in a free trade zone as opposed to a free port is that at the free trade zone you're not limited to say 10% or Is it 10%?
Yeah, free zones are 10%,
Yeah.
but whereas the other zones are all manufacturing like garments and all.
So you
other
can
things.
actually have a full-blown manufacturing
Exactly.
process.
All of them are for re-export.
Right.
What happens is the free zones also don't come under the purview of the customs administration instead of BOI. Also, it doesn't come under exchange control regulations.
This is, you're talking about the free port.
Free zones, yeah, free port, free zones.
Same thing.
Same thing.
Okay.
It's the same word.
Right.
So they are actually goods in transit.
Okay.
They are considered in a offshore destination.
Oh, okay.
So if I want to get some wine out of a free zone
Yeah.
to the Sri Lankan market for hotels,
Yeah.
I have to go through the customs again, pass the customs entry, and pay the duties what is relevant to Sri Lanka, and then only they can release it to Sri Lanka.
You can take that component out.
Yeah, so it's considered an offshore destination, although it is within Sri Lanka.
Then what about, let's say, garbage? I think we all agree that garbage is not permitted.
Not permitted.
Right. So then, is it permitted to bring garbage, something that is not permitted in the laws of Sri Lanka, into one of these free ports?
No, nobody can bring it unless you declare and get special permission for whatever the product they are bringing.
Right.
Because there are two customs involved, what is the shipping country and the importing country.
Right.
So Sri Lanka has what is called a negative list or a schedule B.
Right.
Certain things you can't bring. Customs
Full stop.
ordinance, full stop.
No.
You can't.
Right.
Simply as that. But there are certain things, products like whatever you want to bring, and it's allowed, but you have to get permission from import controller, the environmental authority for particular reason. So that process is different. You have to go and get approvals for a particular reason. If they give approval, then the customs, you submit those documents to customs, and then customs will monitor those containers specifically, and then only they will be allowed to bring it.
And does Sri Lanka have a facility that can process hazardous waste?
Well, not really. Sri Lanka doesn't allow, we do have like whatever that is incinerated, it's done at the Putlam cement factory. So once customs decide something is hazardous, most of the things they try to reship it out of Sri Lanka. If they detect something, they ask the shipping line to take it back to the origin port. Or otherwise, if they really can't find the consignee or anybody who has dumped the containers in the port, what they do is, if it is hazardous, they'll definitely have a mechanism of destroying it with other authorities, preventive measures. That has to be available with customs, and they do incinerate at the Putlam Cement Company.
So that is the closest thing that Sri Lanka has to a sort of a hazardous waste disposal site.
Yes.
What happens if the cement company says, hey, hang on, chaps, I've got too much of stuff here, I've got no more capacity?
No, it has, for my experience, it has never happened.
Never happened.
Because I think we rarely get that kind of hazardous cargo into Sri Lanka.
Okay.
I mean, like, people can ship even nuclear material in containers.
Yeah.
Right? So even the US customs are present in Sri Lanka as a megaport to detect such activity. Sri Lanka is called a megaport because of that reason. US customs are present here, monitoring it here as a transshipment location.
What sort of rule, what is the extent of their remit? What can they do? The US customs who are present here.
Well, what they do is they scan for radiation on suspicion, or there's customs intelligence. They monitor, track these containers, and they will take the necessary precautions if it is bound to the US.
Always in conjunction with our customs.
Of course, yes. They have to work with our customs, and there is agreement between the two customs to how to understand. This has been there for I think after 2001, the attack on New York, that the mega customs initiative was taken by 3 or 4 initiatives taken by the border control of the US to prevent hazardous stuff coming into the US ports.
I see. And back again with the free port,
Yes.
Question being asked about what laws apply there. What happens to Sri Lanka's laws when you're considering the free port area?
Yeah, it is bound by the Sri Lankan territorial laws, border control laws. So in the event of suspicion of anything, any of the border control agencies can check containers that are going into the free ports.
So the customs have a right
They have the right, border control rights.
To enter Freeport?
Yes, they
and
do.
To check what's going
Only
on?
on suspicion, they have to give the reason.
Okay.
And then they can enter, because BOI is the main facilitator.
Right.
So BOI and customs anyway work together.
Right.
So in the event of a suspicion, the customs can write to the BOI and say, we suspect these containers to be having something we want to check.
It sounds very complicated and time consuming.
It's not really, it doesn't happen like that, because none of those containers are bound to Sri Lanka.
Right.
They go back again, so BOI ensures that all is shipped back. Nothing remains.
So can you can't bring, let's say, what is on this B schedule, you can't bring them in Freeport or no Freeport?
No.
It's just a big no?
No, big no, yes.
Okay.
It's called the Schedule B.
Okay. So obviously there will be unscrupulous traders from both sides. What steps would a port in the UK, for example, take to see what's actually going out there? Sure.
Yeah, most customs, what happens is they know their clients, generally the export importers are registered, and they have intelligence of what they do. What happens is sometimes, especially in our countries, they rob the HS code or the customs access of a reputed company and use that to enter the computer system and declare on behalf of somebody else.
Oh.
It happens even in Sri Lanka. I don't know whether it happens in UK, but it can happen. If you have the access of, say you have a shipment and you are a reputed company, if I can get the access codes for that, I can do an electronic declaration under your name.
Is that the equivalent of a PIN number for your ATM machine?
Absolutely.
I see.
And what happens is some of the traders give it without realizing the problem.
So
give it to third parties.
They don't realize the gravity
of it, and they give it to third parties to pass their custom entries. And these guys have the passwords. So
Right.
if they want to do a fraudulent thing, they can use the most credible company and use something and ship it out.
Right.
And it has happened in Sri Lanka.
Right.
Customs have so many times warned traders. So they re-register again with a new number. So fraud happens in international trade. As I said, somebody can declare something fraudulent in UK to the UK customs. They won't check each and every container.
Is there any sort of responsibility on the part of, say, the UK customs? I'm just talking specifically about these containers of so-called garbage and mattresses.
Mattresses, yes.
Now, is there some sort of obligation on the part under international treaties that the UK customs to ensure that this box is going to Sri Lanka, but it's got garbage, so you can't go. You can't.
Well,
leave.
if it is garbage, yes. But in the case of mattresses is not an illegal product to be shipped out of UK
Right.
to Sri Lanka. Nor does Sri Lanka considers recycling mattresses as illegal.
Right.
So you declare as mattresses and put a HS code as per given by the UK customs.
Right.
So when it comes, the documents indicate that HS code.
Right.
So it's up to the Sri Lankan customs to randomly check when they are
But if
clearing.
they come to the Freeport,
Yes.
and if somebody sort of abandons the cargo, what happens then?
In the Freeport, generally cargo cannot be abandoned because it will be reshipped to the party whom you are bringing it in.
Ah.
Right? You
So if
cannot.
nobody. Oh, okay.
The operator has a liability to reship it to the party they received from.
So when it comes into a Freeport, let's say on the pretext that it's going to be value added, the 10% or whatever, and that's not done. What is there kind of a time period in which you've got to do this thing?
Yes, there are time periods stipulated in the regulations.
Right.
Within 1 year maximum, you have to reship it.
Right.
Whatever, even if you are storing a wine bottle, you have to have a rationality. Otherwise, you have to give a reason to the BOI why the stock has not moved.
Right.
So there is a strong monitoring system for the free ports.
Right.
And also the packing material has to be reshipped to the third party because you can't keep it in Sri Lanka.
So it just goes back again to the person who shipped it anyway?
If it is rejected and reshaped, but otherwise if a UK seller is sending to Sri Lanka and then he has various buyers in the Indian subcontinent, so he will give instructions so much to go to so many countries. So that job is done by the free port operator.
Right.
The free port operator even can't keep the packing material in Sri Lanka. He has to put it into one of those containers and send it.
So either it goes to other places nominated by the
Seller.
seller, or it goes back to, the residue goes back to the seller?
If it is asked to be rejected and reshipped, yes, it has to go back to the seller, or the seller can say you can send it to a third country, in another country which he has selected.
Right. So is it quite easy for people intent on beating the system to make false declarations, get in essence any item that's on the B schedule here,
If
and
you
ship it and then get it here and then suddenly just disappear?
B items are, I mean, people won't declare B items if they are bringing in, they put a fraudulent HS code.
Yes,
It's a matter of for the customs to monitor those things and see whether anybody is bringing arms and ammunition, drugs, lots of things. Even B items came during the LTT war, there were containers cleared.
Right.
So again, it's not 100% proof, system is not there.
So does that mean that 100% of the containers entering Sri Lanka or even coming into a free port or a free trade zone is not all checked?
Yeah, no country can check 100%.
You can't.
You can't. You know, for example, Rotterdam is the main port to Europe. They scan for cigarettes and various things to be coming in.
Yeah.
They only scan about 2%.
Right.
But still there is unlawful stuff going into the European market through the ports.
And Rohan, what about this issue of abandoned cargo? So you also say that they may have up even in some cases even a year in which they need to re-export. So the alarm bells can only ring after that period.
No, in the case of port, if you bring a container to the port of Colombo, if you don't submit your documents within 3 weeks, customs will query why it has not been cleared, because demurrage will be adding on to your container. So it's going to be a costly affair. Then after 3 months they auction it. If it's a legal product, HS code that is valid for the local market for import, somebody has imported and dumped it for various reasons. Maybe the business has collapsed, it doesn't have money. So people then dump the containers. Then customs, generally what happens is they advertise on newspapers and auction it.
Who monitors the free port then?
Both BOI and customs.
It's a joint effort.
It's a joint effort.
And at what point does the free port operator, at what point do they become culpable?
Well, from the time of the goods entering the port of Colombo until moving out into the free port and moving out of the free port, they are responsible for the goods that they have brought in, for the declarations, and they have to balance their books like in a bank to the BOI, saying so much is left, so much is shipped out. And
if who's the licensing authority? Is it the BOI?
Board of Investment.
Okay.
It comes as an investment to Sri Lanka. Up to $5 to $10 million you have to invest to have a free port.
Would it be fair to say that so it's ongoing, the checking up process or the watching process? So it's a BOI who will say to operator XYZ of whatever port, listen, you guys aren't doing your job.
Of course, yes. In Hambantota we have the gas. It's also coming under the redistribution model of free ports.
Right.
Colombo has about 5 or 6 companies doing various products.
Right. So, but my point is now these, from what we know about one particular shipment, we find that when we try to check up on it, the importer isn't there. He sort of disappeared. So it's abandoned cargo. Isn't there an onus on the free port operator to ensure that they're dealing with a bona fide customer?
Yes, if it is abandoned in the free port, yes, free port operator is responsible for the customer whom they are dealing with. But if it's abandoned in the port of Colombo, it can be anybody's cargo if it's destined to Sri Lanka, not to the free port.
Obviously, from what you're saying, the free port operator, there's a big responsibility on their part.
Of course, yes.
Because I'm sure it's not just given to any old person.
No.
They must have because yes, and they especially when as in Sri Lanka, we're coming out of a war scenario, and we appear to have entered some form of terrorism scenario, global maybe, but still, because the potential to abuse the system is there.
It is there. That's why ports and free ports are all declared as high security zones.
Okay.
Specifically, and so even the Navy can, if they find suspicion of anything, they can open up a container.
Has the BOI ever warned any of these operators?
I think there have been issues where customs have raised suspicion and they have gone and checked up certain free ports, but there's nothing been found illegal up now.
Should anyone found like that, what will happen? Will they get their license cancelled?
Well, there is a process of the government how it can be cancelled.
Yeah.
So there will be an investigation and there is a process, due process, and of course then they can, if it is harmful, really harmful to the country, what they have done in purpose.
But how intense is the due diligence work? You know, you get a guy who turns up and says, listen, you know, I want to do ABC, I've got this wonderful idea, you know, I'm going to rework these things and export them to the moon. How intense is the checking up process?
Well, the initial registration process is very strict. They look at a lot of, they'll go through a
registration of the person who wants to use a free port.
To operate a free port.
Right.
Right. So
okay.
Mostly.
No, I don't mean that. I mean that's clear that it's pretty intense.
Yes.
Especially taking into account security and so on. I'm talking about a client a customer who wants to use the facility at the free port.
That has to be is the responsibility of the free port operator to find out whom they are dealing with.
Right.
And there are millions of global customers. So they will go and market the free port to them in different countries and say, why don't you use Sri Lanka as the storage destination instead of Dubai or Singapore? Because we can deliver fast.
But obviously there's a problem now because some customer, some buyer has used the free port and the material is still there, and after a year, well actually in one case it's about 18 months, it's still there.
That's in the port of Colombo, not in a free port.
Okay.
Port of Colombo, that is under the government custody, not in a free port.
Right.
And that the customs, it's monitored by the customs. It was not brought for a free port company as far as I know.
Right.
Free port companies also do the same things like these mattresses coming back and reworking.
Yeah.
But this was brought into a consignee who was not responsible for a free zone client.
Right.
So that consignee has disappeared.
Right.
And shipping lines were all stuck with these 100 containers for 1 year.
Right.
And nobody wanted to buy it through the auction either. So now the customs wants to open it.
Does that mean they want to auction it?
They can auction it as a buyer, otherwise they'll have to destroy it.
Who pays?
Well, the government pays for it, that kind of operation.
Again, you and I and the people.
People will have to pay. That's how, all over the world, that's how there's a mechanism of destroying. But if you look at trade, billions of trade, I mean it's point.
So it's a small,
very small
fraction.
percent, yes.
Okay. Because, you know, from a public perspective, we find that one of these buyers is not there. We've gone to that address and they're not there. You then look at the other side, the exporter, if you like. It's a residential address. It's difficult to imagine that them sending one container, let alone 8. You know, and then there's another one where they've sent, I think, 5. And so these get stuck. But because you say, look, they're given a time period to do it, should the free port operator be proactive and actually checking up to see what activity is happening within their zone?
Free port operator is absolutely responsible for what they bring in and what they ship out.
Right. So does that mean
they are accountable to the BOI and say, look here, this is the problem we have faced, if at all. Because
now in this case, somebody's brought these, let's say the mattresses, and it's still there.
It's in the port.
No, but we've got a thing to say that it's gone to one particular operator.
I am not sure whether it's the same consignment and the same consignee.
No.
But a free port operator...
We've got 2 lots, one of 8 containers, one of 5,
yes,
where they've gone to the same free port.
Right.
But clearly the buyer is missing. So when that sort of thing happens, when somebody's using the free port and they say, look, we're going to rework it, is the onus on the free port operator to constantly check to see whether they're actually doing what they're saying.
Yeah, so in the case of Freeport, it's 100% operated more or less for re-export.
Yeah.
So there are no local buyers.
Right.
Right, there are no local buyers.
Okay.
You can't, if you are bringing to local buyer, you come on the normal channel.
Yes, right. So
in this case,
yeah.
the international player who supplies whatever for recycling
yeah.
brings to Sri Lanka, and
yeah.
he has multiple operators in the region who buys different products.
Right.
So it can take up to 1 year sometimes for him to say, okay, now ship this quantity to this port in India.
Yeah.
So until that time, the Freeport operator charges him the rent and he can keep it.
Yeah.
And only thing is he has to justify to the BOI why he is keeping it.
Now, in this case, where the Freeport operator appears to have lost their client and the goods are still there, what happens to the stuff?
Well, it's not the Freeport operator who has lost the client, it's the international buyer who uses the Freeport operator
yeah.
has lost the client.
Right.
Freeport operator's job is holding it and value adding and charging a rent.
But how long does he hold on to something?
Well, he can get permission if the supplier says no, we need another 6 months to keep it.
Yeah.
We go the Freeport operator applies to BOI and say this particular consignment X number of containers, it will be kept for another 6 months.
Right.
So BOI can give approval.
Right.
Otherwise, the law is that if they want to destroy it,
yeah.
finally the supplier says shipment is not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Destroy it.
Or the buyer hasn't paid the Freeport operator.
Yeah, I mean Freeport operator, anything like that. The Freeport operator then will go to the BOI and say we want to destroy this. And they will get permission from customs to take it to the incinerator and destroy it.
Right.
Or most of the, as far as I know, 100% of Freeport operator, everything goes shipped back to another third destination.
Right.
They don't keep it here.
Right. So where somebody's lost the onward client, let's say, who pays for the shipment to be returned back to the...
It has to be, the shipping part is done by the owners of the cargo.
Okay. By the owners of the cargo.
Cargo is.
There's no impact on the...
No, operator is not the owner of the cargo.
Right.
He's a facilitator only.
But if they've done a runner and then they end up holding the baby, then they have
There's
to
a cost of destroying.
Okay.
Yeah.
They have to bear that then.
They will generally get into agreement with the supplier if he's an ethical supplier and he has actually for a real reason lost a client. And then the Freeport operator will talk to a supplier and see what can be done. He might pay them for the destroying. There are various arrangements.
Right. So the question that we in the media get asked by members of the public is, look, we can't even handle our own garbage. We can't handle it to such an extent that it kind of falls on people's houses, and like what happened in Mitramulla, for example. And so why do we want to handle somebody else's, the British garbage?
Well, I don't know whether that's garbage, first of all, right, in the first place. The international trade, there are fraudulent shippers.
Yeah.
Now, for example, from Sri Lanka, we send Ceylon, pure Ceylon tea.
Purportedly?
Right.
Or for
good
real?
quality pure. But there are fraudulent shippers who send the dust as pure Ceylon tea. And it lands in the Middle Eastern countries and it's...
But that's a complete fraud, isn't it?
It's same thing. So in the other countries also they do. They say declare mattresses and they can put something else inside the container.
Right.
That is fraudulent shippers. Now there are shippers who declare cocoa peat and they send cow dung out of Sri Lanka. And the buyers get slandered with these things. So those are disputes in international trade, and fraudulent traders are all over the world.
Right.
It doesn't matter if it is Sri Lanka or Singapore or Dubai.
Yeah.
These things do happen. Every day it happens.
Right.
So that is part and parcel of international trade.
Can a Freeport operator import things for their own account?
No, they can't.
They can't.
They can't. They can only bring in equipment and things like that with permission from the finance ministry, which they are given duty free.
To operate the...
Yeah, I mean equipment, cranes, stacking things, they can bring what is needed for them, infrastructure, but they cannot bring their own products at all.
Right, so they can't suddenly go into the business
No, they are completely barred from doing that business.
of holding wines and then...
Wines is somebody else's wine.
Yeah.
Part to Malay, part to India. That's their business.
That's their business.
Yes.
But they're not in the business of doing that business.
There's a total, it's a Freeport operator is just something beyond a freight forward and a logistics company.
Yeah.
Something way beyond that. So that is the biggest example is Jebel Ali port in Dubai is a Freeport operator.
Right.
Various companies operate with that zone.
But just going back to tea, tea isn't done in the free ports,
No,
is it?
it's restricted under Schedule B.
Right.
You can't do it because the local tea brands have protested that brand valuation and value addition in Sri Lanka for third brands are not allowed.
Right.
But certain teas are imported for blending with the local teas, given a list of things.
Very small quantity.
Small quantities are allowed by customs.
Right.
That is going through the customs system.
Right.
But free ports are completely prohibited from bringing in any tea.
Ah, I see. So that it's completely
Yes.
debarred from there.
Yes.
What do you think? What do you think will happen now if you know these apparently, from what we can work out, the buyer has gone somewhere. Nobody knows, and so all this cargo's there. What happens if they can't find the guy out there in the point of origin?
Yes.
Whose responsibility? Is it the shipper or is it the free port operator?
Well, if it has been brought to the free port operator and you can't find a buyer, it's the free port operator who will be responsible.
Right.
But in the case of if the goods have come to the port of Colombo,
Yeah.
it's under the customs supervision. Customs will auction it, open it and auction it if it is genuine cargo that is allowed in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they will take precautions to ask the shipping lines to see whether they can reship it. If not, the other side says, no, we don't want it. We have shipped it to Sri Lanka under documentation.
Would you like to see the BOI and in conjunction with the customs being more proactive, more dynamic?
This is quite common. I mean, every 2-3 weeks people dump various cargoes. So customs auction it. Otherwise, they will destroy it, take it to the incinerator and destroy the thing. Sometimes the shipping lines pay for that because they want the container released for them.
Ah, for them.
Yeah, because they are holding their equipment for years, which is costing them a lot of money. So they somehow want to get their box back.
How do we rate our ports and our free ports around with the region?
Well, our port is 22nd ranked in the world in terms of transshipment. 11th ranked in terms of connectivity. Free ports, we got into the business about 5 years back, doing very well, created a lot of jobs in Sri Lanka. Problem we have in free ports is we don't have enough land for investors. A lot of foreign logistics companies wants to come and set up, but we don't have good land closer to the ports.
Well, so at the end of the day, bottom line is in this, when all this cargo is abandoned or anything else, the free port operator has to hold the baby at the end.
Yeah, if there's anything abandoned in his premises, he's responsible and answerable to the BOI and take necessary precautions on behalf of his supplier or the party who has rejected to buy it. That is his responsibility. He's accountable for the goods in it.
Okay. Unfortunately, you've been so thorough and so on that we've run out of time. There's several messages that have come through. People are talking about national security, sovereignty, international tax, all sorts of things.
If you want to be a logistics hub like Singapore or Dubai, we need to operate free zones and free ports to connect the global supply chains. That's simple as that. But we have to have a good regulatory system to monitor, to minimize damage on international frauds.
Rohan Masakorala, thank you ever so much for being on Newsline.
Thank you.
We do appreciate your time. And there you go. That's the way it was on Newsline. Sorry for the overrun, but we have been enjoying ourselves listening to Rohan Masakorala on the challenges faced in our shipping industry and so on. And that's it. So take care. Have a great day ahead and God bless.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.